Everybody, how's everybody doing? So I'm Dr. David with Stronghold Health. This is our Facebook Live that we're doing for the month of January here, 2021. We just wanted to give everybody an opportunity to hop on to Facebook here, Facebook Live. If you're already on, you've gotten the notification, you've received a text message as a patient, do me a favor. Hit the share button, hit the like button, send this to a friend, tag them in the comment section down below. Show us a little bit of love, help get out the good word, because tonight we're going to be spending some time going through how to read nutrition labels, which is always very, very exciting. Nutrition labels can be extremely daunting if you allow it to be daunting, but it doesn't have to be. If you follow simple rules, just like anything else in life, if you have simple rules to follow, typically it helps you navigate the woods, navigate yourself out of the woods and find yourself to safety. And in this case, it's just following loose guidelines that are going to help you eat more healthy and get good quality nutrients in the body. So originally I started actually doing this type of information on guided grocery tours. Myself and a bunch of other chiropractors have done this over the years. It was something I did as an event called Shopping with the Doctor. And let's see, Shopping with the Doc, I've got I think a picture of it somewhere around here, what it looked like back in the day when I was doing this. Here you go. So this is actually at a Whole Foods market local here in Nashville, and this was just one of many tours that I've done over the years. So I put together a shopping guide. So if you would like to get your hands on this shopping guide, make sure you comment in the comment section, and we'll make sure to send you the downloadable link for that PDF so that you can get your hands on all of the information that I'm going to be sharing with you tonight. So with that being said, again, if you're watching, hit the share button, hit the like button, comment down there, tag a friend in the comment section. Just let us know that you're watching, show us a little bit of love, and help spread the good word. So we're going to be going through 5 steps to read nutrition labels. Now, starting off, nutrition labels. If you go to Google and you type in nutrition labels, you're probably going to see all sorts of stuff that come up, right? So you're going to see, sorry, this is ingredient list, but on nutrition labels, you got a lot of different content, a lot of different information that you'll see on there. So, let's see, labels, if I could work the good old Google machine. Recently, I think the nutrition labels as of 2020, I think may have gone through some slight changes. So some of the content that I'll share with you tonight isn't going to be 100% accurate, but I would say like 99% accurate with you. So typical nutrition label, just kind of orienting ourselves here, is going to have what looks like this. So you're going to have on nutrition labels pretty much any packaged product you guys already know should have this information on there. It's going to have total calories. It's going to have how many of those calories come from fat, and then they're going to have a percentage daily value that's going to be on here on the nutrition label list. And this is honestly derived from I believe it's the ADA recommended or AMA recommended guidelines, USDA recommended guidelines for the percentage of how much of each of these things you should be ideally getting in your diet. So it doesn't always 100% reflect on what you yourself should be getting, because you might have certain restrictions with your diet if you're on a specific eating plan, if you're on a specific diet or a calorie restricted plan, or you're counting macros or so on and so forth. So take everything I say obviously with a grain of salt when I go through the 5 steps or the recommendations on how to read a nutrition label. Anyway, with that being said, back to where we were. The total grams of fat, the total amount of cholesterol, the total amount of sodium, the total amount of carbohydrates, and then of those carbohydrates, how many of those grams of carbohydrates are coming from fiber, are coming from sugar, and then the total grams of protein. And then any significant amount of vitamin levels typically are going to be found directly underneath of the second horizontal bar, second horizontal black bar. So that was the original label. The new label, basically what they ended up doing was making the serving size more prominent, so people are more aware of the serving size up top. Because typically when you would look at this in the old school format, you would kind of go right by that 2/3 cup serving size. And so your eyes kind of almost don't see it. You go right to the next bold-faced thing. So on the new nutrition label, there is still 8 servings in here, but the serving size is 2/3 of a cup to draw your attention to. This is all based off of these numbers down here, the total serving size. So when you go to the next line down, calories obviously is bigger, so this is total calories per 2/3 a cup of serving. And then what they took away on here was how many calories came from fat, which is kind of a bummer. It's pretty annoying because one of the rules that I like to go by is of the total calories, you need to know how many of those are actually coming from fat sources. So with that being said, what you would have to do is a multiplier to figure out how many calories are coming from fat. So anyway, moving along, just giving you a general guidepost of what nutrition labels typically look like to familiarize yourself with them. So what I'd like to do now is switch my screen here and go to my guide that I created. So the guide that I created for shopping with the doc and doing this over the years, some general guidelines that you'll see on here, and this is everything from vegetables to certain things you want to avoid, more of a 30,000 foot view of general guideposts or guidelines that you want to follow. When it comes to meats and proteins, ideal types and sources of meat and protein, good sources of good fats. If you're going to be eating a lot of fruit, to try and start referencing, it's called the GI index, the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen. So both of these two things we'll talk a little bit about, but the GI index is the glycemic index, so it's how much sugar is going to be in the fruits. Obviously, if I'm eating a fruit that has way more sugar, then it's going to spike my blood sugar levels than eating a fruit that's lower in sugar content. And then we get down here to the vegetables. With vegetables, even more important to follow this Clean 15 Dirty Dozen, which we'll talk about here in just a second. But what I'm going to do is scroll through all of this and go straight to the nutrition label. So on the nutrition label, the first thing when you're looking at rules, and again, if you guys are watching, you got a friend, you're thinking about, hey, you know, they need to learn a little bit more information about this, please tag them in the comment section, share it with them, create a watch party, show us a little bit of love. We totally appreciate it. We love the support and we love being able to help you guys. So nutrition labels, you're going to look at, for rule number 1 right down here, you're going to start with total calories. Okay, so for total calories, you want to find out, boom, how many total calories are in there. And this is going to be important for you if you are calorie counting. You need to know how many calories are in the food that you're about to eat, and be mindful that it's serving size. So if it's like a health bar or something like that and it's 2 servings, you might eat the whole bar. You're gonna have to take this and multiply it by 2. So just some quick math. If you eat 2 servings, this is gonna be 500 calories instead of 250. So that is rule number 1. Just start with the total calories. Cool. Rule number 2 is you're gonna look at total calories that come from fat. Okay. So total calories are 250. How many are coming from fat? 110. And the rule here is, if the calories that are coming from the fat are greater than 25% of the overall calorie intake, my recommendation is usually look at what is the source of fat. And to do that, what you would have to do is then go and look further down and actually read the ingredient list. Okay? So you're going to want to read the ingredient list and try to identify if these are good or not so good sources of fat. Typically, trans fat is going to be something you want to avoid, or oils that are used to make the products, oils that are hydrogenated oil. So if we go back up to oils here, some of the oils you should ideally look for are going to be cold pressed and unrefined. Okay, so you don't want refined oil, because typically with refined oil they're going to alter the oil from its normal ratios of omegas and saturated and unsaturated fats, or they're going to heat that oil and damage the original structure of that oil, making it a trans oil, a trans fat, a hydrogenated oil, or just rancid overall is what we would call that. So good healthy oils are going to be typically cold pressed or unrefined. And then organic extra virgin olive oil is typically going to be best for not cooking, okay? So cold types of stuff. So you want to use organic extra virgin olive oil for salad dressing, drizzle it on an avocado, use it in cold pasta salad or whatever it is, but just don't cook with it, because typically when you cook with it, you put it in the frying pan, you heat it up, it starts to smoke, it's going past what's called its smoke point, and it's actually damaging that oil and making the oil essentially change molecular structure, and it's not necessarily the best for you. So the other one would be organic unrefined, well, we already talked about that, cold pressed unrefined but coconut oil. So this one's a really good one for cooking. Some of these oils will have a temperature guide on the container itself. It'll say don't heat past 385 degrees or something like that. So just be mindful if you're cooking with it that you don't heat it past its point where it can stay stable. Unrefined grapeseed oil might be another good option for you, or 100% grapeseed oil. And then avocado oil is really good for high cooking as well, high heat cooking. So rule number one on this for the nutrition labels, again, is look at the calories, the total number of calories. You're going to need to go ahead and look at how many of those calories come from fat. If it's more than 25%, you want to make sure it's a good source of fat. So that is rule number one and rule number two. So if it's more than 25%, you got to go to the ingredient list and immediately check that fat source to see where is it coming from. Ideally, you want good sources of fat. If it's not a good fat, then my recommendation would be maybe try and find a better product. If what your goal is in reading the nutrition label is to eat healthy. Now, if you don't really care about necessarily eating healthy from a nutrient perspective, and you're doing more of the macronutrient counting, or you're following a guide where you're just trying to get certain number of grams of fat, then this might not be as relevant to you. So then step number 3 is to look at the grams of sugar. You'll see here grams of sugar. Oh, it doesn't let me highlight it because it's a picture, but grams of sugar being 5 grams. So generally speaking, if I'm going to eat 2 servings of this, I would have to multiply that by 2, so it would technically be 10 grams of sugar. And the general rule is anything that's going to be greater than 7 grams of sugar has the potential to spike your blood sugar levels. But it brings into question what type of sugar is that going to be. So again, you might want to look at the ingredient list and just see how much of that sugar is actually coming from something that's very, very high fructose content, or is it more of a natural form of sugar like molasses or coconut sugar or something along those lines. So what it's sweetened with always becomes pretty important, because I can't just do a blanket across the board. Well, if it's greater than 7 grams of sugar, I just can't eat it, because it might be a source of sugar that's a little bit more healthy that my body doesn't put, it doesn't spike my blood sugar levels as quickly, if that makes sense. So what I mean by that is, if I were to almost like chart this, if I eat something and the moment I eat it, it's sweetened with high fructose corn syrup, all of that sugar goes into my blood and it spikes up into my blood very, 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 very quickly, right? So that's the problem and the risk that I have if I eat something that's high sugar content from a poor source of sugar, like high fructose corn syrup, corn sugar, or something along those lines. It will spike my blood sugar levels up very, very quickly, making me prone to metabolic syndrome, which is a predisposition to diabetes and cancer cell formation or neoplastic cell formation, or genetic predispositions to cardiovascular disease. So I don't want that. Ideally, I can eat more sugar, more grams of sugar on the nutrition label, if it's coming from a good source of sugar that takes my body a longer period of time, over a longer period of time, to put that sugar into my bloodstream. So it's more manageable. So even though I might be eating more than 7 grams of sugar, it doesn't spike my blood sugar levels right away. So hopefully that makes sense. And if you have any questions on that, put that in the comment section down below, or send Stronghold Health at PM, because would love to hear what your thoughts are on that. So rule number 1, again, we're looking at the calories. Hold on, get rid of that. We're looking at the total number of calories, 250. If it's more than 25% coming from fat, I want to make sure it's a good source of fat. If it's less than 25%, it doesn't even matter. You should be okay, generally speaking, because it's not enough fat content of the calories to cause you technically harm. And then rule number 3 is I'm going to look at the grams of sugar. And for grams of sugar, I want to make sure that the grams of sugar, again, are less than 7 grams per serving. If it's more than 7 grams per serving, I want to make sure that it's coming from a good source for the sugar. Something that isn't going to spike my blood sugar levels quickly. Gives my body some time to offset that. And typically one of the other rules with that is if you're getting more than 7 grams of sugar, you can typically have a slower absorption of the sugar if you have more grams of fiber. So if you're going to be above, and this is probably something that I need to add underneath of here for an additional rule, but if you're having more than 7 grams of sugar, you can typically offset that, again, with having a good source of fiber. So be mindful of how much fiber is in there. This has 0 grams of fiber. It's not necessarily going to help me all that much, because fiber typically is going to slow sugar absorption in your blood. So if I had maybe, of the total 31 grams of carbohydrates in here, I had, I don't know, half of that coming from fiber, or even 10 grams coming from fiber, I'd be okay with eating something that has a little bit more sugar. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so next we're going to look at carbohydrates. So for the carbohydrates, this rule, again, keep in mind this rule is typically going to be more focused towards the person that's trying to eat keto or lower carbohydrate. But it's still a healthy rule to follow across the board. Again, be mindful of this. This might not apply to you if you're doing macro counting, if you're on some other special sort of plan, but it's just something I want to make sure that you're starting to get in the habit of looking for. So number 4 here is going to be carbohydrate calories. So I want to look at the carbohydrates, right? This is where, and probably the only spot where you might need to do a little bit more math. So there's 31 grams of carbs in here. That doesn't tell me how many calories. And so what I mean by that is there's 250 calories. Calories are going to be how much energy, a measure of energy. How much energy does my body require to break this food product down into its parts so it can absorb the nutrients? So it's going to require 250 calories of energy to break all of this down in my body to use this food, ideally. Of those calories, 31 grams are going to be dedicated to carbohydrates. So my body, I have to figure out with a quick look at this, how much energy is it required for my body to break the carbs down. So the easy way to do that is to actually take it and multiply it by 4. So everybody's shopping with their phones these days. You can go ahead and pull out your phone and then just grab the calculator app, go 31 grams, and multiply that by 4. Pretty simple. So 31 times 4, I'll just round it, is, let's just say 30 times 4. We're looking at 120 calories. So now I went from grams, using the conversion, to get total calories. Okay, cool. So the rule is carbohydrates, ideally I want it to be less than 50% of the total calories. So if I go back up to summarize this, total calories, 250. Half of 250 is what? Yes, 125. I'm glad you said that. So whoever, 125. Okay, so, oh, that's my 5. Don't make fun of me. This is the first time using the pen on here. So 125. So that's my rule. I want to be less than 125 for the total calories coming from carbohydrates. So if I take 31, I multiply it by 4, and I'm rounding it, I get to 120. That's supposed to be a 2. It's hard with a touchpad to draw. So 120 is less than half of the total calories. So I guess that would fall within my rules, which means I should be okay. So we're looking at rule number 4. It's carbohydrate calories have to be less than 50% of the total calories. If you need the conversion, again, carbohydrates and protein, generally speaking, you always will multiply by 4 to get the total number of calories. So if I did, for shits and giggles, I guess is what they call it, for fun in British, if I did for fun want to just go ahead and multiply and figure out how many grams or how many calories does it take to burn 5 grams of protein, I could still do the same multiplier. Proteins times 4, so 4 times 5, it's going to take 20 calories to burn that protein. Cool, now I know. Now fat is the only other one where you have to multiply it by 9. So here's where, if I go back, remember I was saying they changed the nutrition labels up on you. This would be the golden one you want to make sure you remember, is fat you have to multiply by 9. So what I could do is go back here to the web page that was showing you the switch. So since they switched it up here for that first rule, the second rule where you're trying to figure out how many of the calories are fat calories, it doesn't show me on here like it used to on the old one, right? So I just see 230 calories. I'm like, oh great, how many come from fat? So what I would do is take the 8 and then just multiply that by 9. So to make it easy, I could just take 8 and multiply it by 10 because that's just easy math. It's roughly 80 grams. So 80 grams, is it more than 25%? And the answer is, I don't know. So I got to grab out my calculator and do 0.25 times 230. It's 57. So yes, 25% of these calories is about 57 calories. And it's going to take my body 72 calories to burn the fat. So I want to go then to the ingredient list and figure out what is the source of fat. So this is where I can go back to the original tab that I had here with ingredient lists. And we can start looking at a couple of different examples of, if I go lower on the nutrition label and I start looking at the ingredient list, what exactly am I looking for? And so I was going to have Food God on here call in from LA, but the schedule just did not work out, and we rescheduled this live already once, so I needed to make sure that I just went ahead with it tonight. We'll look forward to potentially having him on for a future webinar or live. And so his name's the Flavor God for his brand, and he has 100% all natural, really, really healthy spices that he sells on his website. So he's pretty big on Instagram. You can check him out. He's called the Flavor God. Anyway, with that being said, again, if you guys are watching, comment down below. Let me know if you want the downloadable PDF that I'm going to make available for the shopping guide that I put together. So for the content that I'm sharing here with you now, most of it is going to be summarized in a PDF that we can send to you. You just need to comment down below. And all I ask is that you also, besides comment, share this live. Cool. So share this live, send it to a friend. Let's see how many people we can get requests to download for this. So if we go to the ingredient list, basically what we're looking at is general breakdown of ingredient lists. Typically, here's my number one rule with ingredient lists. If there's 5 million things in the ingredient list and some of them you can't even pronounce, I question putting it in my body, because that's a lot of different chemicals, a lot of different lab alteration, in my opinion, that's taking place. So something to be mindful of there. Try and keep your ingredient lists to a low number of ingredients. And in the ingredient list, things are typically going to be listed in order of most highly concentrated ingredient first, then going down and cascading lower and lower to the least used ingredient in terms of the overall percentage of the makeup. So for instance, this product, whatever it is, high fructose corn syrup is going to be the number one ingredient. Then after they used high fructose corn syrup, they put in corn syrup as the second ingredient. Then finally they used water to water it down. If I had to guess, this is probably apple juice or something along those lines, or maybe a soda. Salt, cellulose gum, caramel color, natural and artificial flavors. So the guidelines for this, some of these companies can get away with just putting in artificial flavors and you have no idea honestly what it is, but it's a good way for them to kind of hide things in there. So just be mindful of that. Hexametaphosphate, sorbic acid, interesting, and sodium benzoate. So this is more than likely a soda. So what I was trying to do is find you an example of something that's going to have oils in it. And so the reason why is because if you're looking and you're following step 1, total number of calories, step 2, how many calories come from fat. If it's more than 25% coming from fat, I want to see, is it a good or is it a bad source of fat? Then I go down to the ingredient list, and on the ingredient list I'm going to want to go ahead and see, is there any oils? Oils are typically going to be the number one source of fats coming from that product. So on this one, I'm looking at it, I see flour first, I see let's see, corn syrup for a sweetener, I see sugar for a sweetener. Sugar at least sounds better than corn syrup. Then I see soybean and palm oil with TBHQ for freshness, which is a preservative. That actually is going to be one of the things I want to avoid. This isn't going to be a healthy source of oil. Typically, soybean, corn oil, cottonseed oil, rapeseed oil, vegetable oil, canola oil are going to be like the big ones I'm trying to avoid because they're typically going to be rancid oils, really, really poor quality, not a good source of fat, and bad sources of fat ultimately are going to create an increased inflammatory response in the body, and they're going to cause a whole slew of other problems. But generally speaking, I'm trying to look for good, healthy sources of fat. But then this also breaks my rule, honestly, for way too many ingredients in here, especially when I'm starting to do a bunch of different dyes. I don't know why I need to eat food dyes, but that's besides the fact. So this is just showing you an example of identifying oils or fats that are contained in a product. Let me see if I can show you one more example. Let's look at this one. So I'm going to shut up for a second and let you look at this, and when you're looking at it, tell me, do you see anything on here that is an oil? It's not letting me make it bigger, sorry. That's as big as it gets. So let's see, modified cellulose, caramel color, malic acid, red 40, enriched wheat flour, vitamin B's, whole grain oats, sugar, sunflower oil. Okay, so sunflower oil, if it was high oleic sunflower oil, might be on borderline, might be okay, but then we get high fructose corn syrup, so there's one source of oil. So that is the first one that I see. Fructose corn syrup, strawberry puree, concentrate, glycerin, sugar, modified cornstarch, sodium. So not a lot of fat in here, but a lot of carbs and a lot of sugar added in. But anyway, sunflower oil might be a borderline, it might be a better option, but it's not the best option. So worst option, again, are going to be those other oils that I was just telling you about, which is corn oil, cottonseed oil, rapeseed oil, what else am I missing in here? Soybean oil, vegetable oil, and canola oil. So those are the ones typically I want to avoid. Safflower oil, not sunflower, S-A-F-F, flower oil is another one I want to avoid. And then I might be able to get away with sunflower oil. It's a better option, but it's not the best. And then the best option, again, is going to be the, where did it go? Shopping with the dog. Find my list here. The better oils are going to be these again. So for good sources of fats, right here, cold pressed unrefined coconut oil, extra virgin olive oil, again, probably not in things that are cooked. Unrefined for the coconut oil, grapeseed oil, 100% grapeseed oil or avocado oil, and then maybe you could put sunflower oil on there. But those are going to be typically the big go-tos. Alrighty. So in summary, you got total calories. Start here. Look at the total number of calories. Try and figure out how many of those total calories are coming from fat for rule number 2. If it isn't listed here on the old format nutrition label, you're going to have to just look at the total grams of fat, and then you're going to have to multiply that by 9. So 12 grams times 9 should be roughly 110 calories. So That's just a quick reference on that. So less than 25% of the total calories should be coming from fat. If it's more than 25%, I'm going to go down to the ingredient list like we were just looking at and try and figure out where the oils. So what are the sources of fats? Are they good fats or unhealthy fats? If they're good fats and it's more than 25%, great. I'm not too concerned about it because I've got good, rich sources of healthy fat, which I need to remember that healthy fat is good for me. Bad fat is bad for me. It's not just a blanket across the board that fat is bad and we're trying to do low-fat diet. We actually need good, rich sources of fat in our diet. So if it's greater than 25%, I go to the ingredient list. If it's really good, healthy oils, cool, I'm eating it, I'm happy with it. All right, then sugars, we're looking for sugars to be less than 7 grams. So this is 5 grams per serving. If I only eat 1 serving, I'm probably good. It's not going to spike my blood sugar levels, even if it's a bad sugar. If it's a greater than 7 grams of sugar, then I'm going to go down to the ingredient list and look for the source of sugar. So high fructose corn syrup, sugar, just generally speaking, are not necessarily going to be the best options for me because, again, they're spiking blood sugar levels. But let's say it's coconut sugar that has a little bit more fiber in it. Let's say it has the ingredient listed of maybe like molasses or stevia or maybe erythritol, which is a sugar alcohol, or xylitol, which is a sugar alcohol. Then, you know what, I'm okay with it if it's more than 7 grams of sugar. Or if it's more than 7 grams of sugar, but I have an equal amount or higher of grams of fiber, then I might be okay with it as well because, again, that sugar is not going to spike my bloodstream super fast so my body can process it. Then I'm going to look at the total carbohydrates. If it's less than 50%, in this case, 50% of 250 is 125 calories. So half of the 250 is 125 calories. I look at the carbohydrates. How many calories does it take to burn that? I have to multiply it by 4. So as long as it's less than 50% of total calories, I'm not too concerned with the breakdown of the calories, and I'm happy with it. If it's greater than 50% of calories, I might want to consider putting that back and finding a different product that's better ratios for me if, and especially if, I'm doing a keto or low carbohydrate focused diet. But especially if it already breaks my sugar rule, I do not want to break the sugar rule and the carbohydrate rule simultaneously because a lot of carbohydrates body breaks down into sugar. So now I'm getting even more of a blood sugar spike and even more sugar in my diet and my bloodstream. So if you can avoid breaking both 3 and 4 for the rules, that would be great. But if you break 3, definitely don't want to break 4 on top of it. And this was supposed to be 5 steps to reading nutrition labels. So the question you're probably thinking at this point is, what's step number 5? Step number 5 comes from the developer of chiropractic. His name was BJ Palmer. He had a book. Well, he had sayings that he liked to put all around Palmer College of Chiropractic to help with morale and help encourage people. He liked the one-liners. And one of his was actually called Rule Number 9. And Rule Number 9, sorry for the potential cuss, but it was, don't take yourself too damned seriously. So Rule Number 5 is just try and have fun with it. If you're new to reading nutrition labels, I'm giving you some guidelines. This isn't the only way. There's other ways of being able to break this down. And at the end of the day, it all depends on what your goals are. So if your goal is to just eat healthier overall, try and get less sugar in your bloodstream, stop spiking your blood sugar levels and encouraging diabetes and cardiovascular disease issues, then I'd encourage you for sure, follow these rules. But at the end of the day, try and keep it simple. Don't be too dang hard on yourself and try and have fun with it. Like BJ Palmer said, don't take yourself too darn seriously. But still try and be disciplined and be an adult and take care of yourself, because remember, what you put into your body is going to turn into what your body is. We are what we eat because our body can only make new healthy cells from the nutrients that we give it. So if I'm always eating really, really poor, low nutrient and bad quality foods, the cells in my body have to, by default, get sicker over time. So my encouragement for you is don't live to eat, rather eat to live. Be mindful of what you're putting in your body. So those are going to be my 5 steps. Hope this has been beneficial and helpful for you. And as an added plus, just to give you a little preview of what you would get your hands on when you put your name in the comment section below and let us know you want a copy of the shopping guide. All you have to do is put your name down there and say, hey, I want a shopping guide, and we'll send you the download link for this. Another thing that to be mindful of is when you're looking for shopping for your fruits and vegetables, to be aware of this thing called the Clean 15 Dirty Dozen. The whole concept with this is on the Clean 15 Dirty Dozen. It is a measurement of overall pesticides, herbicides, and chemicals that are used to grow that fruit or that vegetable. So if you're going to be eating a lot of fruits and vegetables, which I hope you are, because that's God's food, right? And it's colorful, and we want a colorful plate, and we want a lot of really rich natural nutrients coming into our body. I don't want to always be eating just processed food, right? Packaged food. I want good, healthy food. So fruits and vegetables are always going to be a plus. If you're going to be eating a lot of that stuff, though, you can cut the toxicity exposure for yourself by 85 to 90%, depending on what research you're looking at, by simply following the Clean 15 and Dirty Dozen. And what the Clean 15 and Dirty Dozen is basically trying to make sure you're buying organic versions of fruits and vegetables that are known to have the highest concentration of pesticides and chemicals that you actually would eat. So if the fruit's been grown without a protective covering, and a great example of this is strawberries, okay? Strawberries are the most stuck-up fruit on the planet because they're the only fruit that I know of that wears its seeds on the outside. Anyway, that was supposed to be a joke. You're supposed to laugh. But if you didn't laugh, it's okay. Humor me. So with strawberries, basically, I can spray as a farmer that strawberry with pesticides to try and keep the bugs off, so I get a nice, beautiful red strawberry. Everything I spray on that strawberry, though, goes into the strawberry because it's a very water-rich fruit, and it doesn't have a protective covering like an avocado, for instance, or a banana. So anything that's sprayed on that strawberry, generally speaking, is going to be in the fruit. So if I take that fruit home, let's say I buy a whole carton of strawberries, they're not organic, there's no guidelines for how much pesticide and herbicide and chemicals are used on it. I take it home and I wash that. I think I'm doing myself a service by cleaning the fruit. So now I've got this nice, clean, healthy fruit that I can eat. The problem is the strawberry already has all of the herbicides and pesticide chemical trace in the fruit. So even though I washed it, I'm still eating that strawberry. I'm increasing the amount of toxicity that I'm exposing my body to. Not necessarily the best idea. When if I did pinch a couple more pennies together and buy the organic strawberries instead, I'd at least be cutting the amount of chemical exposure from my body by just buying the organic one instead. So the way that this list works is called the Dirty Dozen, the Clean 15. Basically anything that's on the Dirty Dozen, or let me back up a second. You can save a lot of pain and heartache just by buying everything organic and non-GMO for your fruits and vegetables. But if you can't afford to do that, the next best thing is to follow the Clean 15 Dirty Dozen. So anything on the Dirty Dozen are things you're going to want to make sure you definitely buy organic non-GMO, because you're going to want to cut the toxic exposure of chemicals as best as you can. So this list, though, on a yearly and an annual basis is continually updated and changing. So I would encourage you to download this app. Let's see if I can find it here real quick. Encourage you to download this app from the App Store or Google Store. It's called EWG Healthy Living. It's from the Environmental Working Group. It's a fantastic app that gives you live, up-to-date pesticide and herbicide count and a most recent up-to-date Clean 15 and Dirty Dozen list to kind of go by. And there's other tools and features that are on there to help you with shopping, food selection, so on and so forth. So I'd encourage you to get that, download the EWG Healthy Living app, and use that to your benefit and your advantage for the Clean 15 Dirty Dozen. But basically, what we're talking about here is using the guideposts of anything on the Dirty Dozen, buying that organic, especially green leafy vegetables, kale, collard greens, lettuce, spinach, all that kind of stuff. There's no protective covering on it, so you want to try and buy it organic, buy it clean, get less pesticides and herbicides in your body. And then carrots, another one that's kind of interesting. It's grown in the ground, so you wouldn't think that carrots would test high, but 82% of them tested positive for 2 or more pesticides and herbicides. 96% of peaches tested positive for pesticides, so 2 or more. Yep. Then Clean 15 are typically going to be things that you don't have to be as concerned about. You can probably save a little bit of money if you didn't want to buy it organic. Just encourage you not to buy GMO. And then the last plus I'm going to give you here is, how do I know when I'm looking at fruits and vegetables if it's organic, if it's conventionally grown, if it's genetically modified? And the answer, honestly, is what are called PLU codes. So all of them should have like a sticker on the apple, and it'll say like PLU, number, and then it'll have a bunch of digits. Basically, if that digit starts with the 9, the rhyme on this is 9 is divine. So 9 would be organic. 9 are typically going to be things that I'm looking for. So if I'm trying to shop with avoiding things on the Dirty Dozen, I'm trying to find peaches, I want to make sure my peach PLU code starts with a 9. If it doesn't, it's just conventionally grown, and there's less restrictions that exist for pesticides and herbicides, so that's typically going to be sprayed with way more chemical components than something grown organic. And if you can, you try and avoid genetically modified altogether, because that's a whole other topic in and of itself. But it's been genetically modified in that there's gene splicing, and then there's hybrid blends of fruits and vegetables that are coming out on the market now to grow them bigger. Some of them have a gene built into it that if like a bug eats the plant, it destroys the bug's stomach from the inside, and then the bug dies, so they don't need to spray it with pesticides. That's just some interesting frankenfood type stuff. So I'd encourage you to just avoid anything that starts with an 8 for sure. But if it starts with a 3 or a 4 PLU code, it's conventionally grown. That's most of what you're going to see in the produce section. And then go to a healthier store, you'll have typically more options available for you for 9 PLU codes, which are again organic and healthy. So if this information's been helpful, awesome. I'm so happy to share this content with you. This has just been a brief synopsis of a lot of the content that we cover at our Shopping with the Doctor guide. COVID's changed a little bit of availability and ability to do that, so we haven't done it in a while. This has been a topic that I've had a lot of patients that have been asking about, so I figured what better way than to just go ahead and do a live, record it as a little webinar, and then share it with you guys this way over Facebook and other social media. So even if you're watching this after the fact, still tag your name in the comment section. Let me know you want to download this PDF guide. We'll send you a downloadable link for it so that you have all of this information at your fingertips. I also will include a couple of recipes that are on here that you can make in 30 minutes or less. So just an added benefit, an added little plus for you. The last thing you're going to see on here, 2 other things, is going to be glycemic index. So it's listing fruits and vegetables based on the highest amount of sugar content to the lowest. So if you want to use that to your benefit and eat fruit and still enjoy fruit but get less sugar in your body, great. Then there's another thing that's on here when you're looking at the ingredient list, and on the ingredient list you have all these things you're not entirely sure about. The ingredient list is where a lot of food producers will get you, in that they can put things on there, put things in the food, but then change the name of it to an alias name to try and hide it. Like natural flavoring would be a good example of that. So monosodium glutamate, MSG, we've all heard of that. We know it's not necessarily good. It's supposed to be in takeout Chinese food, and it was a big thing back in the day, but it's called an excitotoxin. It causes a certain type of nerve cell to fire faster than what it otherwise should, and then burn that nerve cell out. So it's toxic to your nervous system. It's called a reaction triggering neurotoxic chemical, or an RTNC. So for this list, this is just a quick one I put together for you. Not all of these are technically reaction neurotoxic chemicals, but some of them are preservatives that cause adverse effects and are things you want to try and avoid if possible. So this is an added plus for an ingredient list on things you might want to look out for and some of the typical symptoms that they cause. So I hope this has been beneficial for you. Again, I'm Dr. Dave with Stronghold Health, and I'm excited to remind you guys about an upcoming event that we actually have, since we're talking about this right here, the toxicity. If you get some of this stuff in your body, you've been eating a lot of packaged, processed, boxed foods over the years, and you're feeling a little lethargic, you're feeling like you've got some headaches, you feel like chronic fatigue, energy levels are kind of messed up, you're having a tough time sleeping with insomnia, you have some food sensitivities, I'd highly encourage you to consider doing a science-based detox program, which is exactly why upcoming here we're going to have an event called Detox with the Doc at our clinic, and we're going to post the details and tag that in the comment section below. So that's an event I'd encourage you to check out. If you're considering doing a detox, you want to learn more about toxicity and how to do a healthy, stepwise detox over a 7-day program that we've put together. It's all science-backed. We're going to be covering that at this event, and the details are going to be in the Eventbrite link below. So I hope to see you there, especially if you're local, you're a patient watching this. We'd love to have you at that event. But if you're watching this from afar, I'm very, very thankful for you spending your time here with me and learning a little bit more about nutrition labels, reaction triggering neurotoxic chemicals, ingredient lists, and all the nerd stuff that I was talking about. So again, Dr. Dave with Stronghold Health. God bless and have a good night.